Support comes from Havana Cigar Lounge in Hesperia, California. It's Shifted Perspective on Sociology of Cars podcast. I'm your host, Shift. In this season, my goal is to bring you other professionals that also live and breathe the automotive and racing industries. Through real conversations, we'll highlight diverse career paths, insider knowledge, and the mindset required to succeed. With us today, we have a new guest. This is Nick. Nick, how are you doing today?
It's going well, my man. I'm very looking forward to sharing my perspective on everything that has kind of blessed me within the past couple of years, and within such a wonderful studio, I'm sure that'll lend to some creative outcomes in the way I kind of put out my words. So thanks for having me.
I love it. And the enthusiasm is awesome. For those of you who don't know, Nick is also a coach at Porsche Experience Center in LA.
That I am.
And he also has a unique pathway that brought him to where he is today.
Just putting it lightly, but I can put it that way, yeah.
Definitely. And so, Nick, let's start off. Who the heck are you? Maybe tell people a little bit about you that the average person doesn't know.
Yeah. So, hello, everyone. Once more, my name's Nick, last name Alaoui. I'm 24 years old, and alongside working at the Porsche Experience Center of Los Angeles, I'm also a first year's master's student at the University of California, Irvine, doing said degree in urban and regional planning. So a little bit different from the whole driving industry, but when people kind of ask me what's the reason for them being so separate to each other? Well, I didn't really start racing or really being in the whole driving industry until after I'd started college. So hence with that, there's a bit of a split life path, I like to call it. But otherwise, I was actually born in Montreal, Canada, grew up in Boston until I was in middle school. Then from there, family moved out to San Francisco Bay Area. And they're still there for the most part. But I did my undergraduate degree at UC Riverside. That's when I was actually started racing in cars while I was finishing up at UCR. And then kind of hung out a little bit in Las Vegas in between the undergrad and graduate degree, doing some other coaching there. And once I knew I was going back to UC Irvine, I had a contact, just helped me get set up with Porsche, and that's about it for the most part. So we'll kind of see what life has in store for me for the future. I've been, for the most part, pretty flexible, obviously, in kind of where I go out, where I go live, what I work in. And I think that's really lent itself to a couple of really cool opportunities that have kind of thrust themselves in my way recently. So honestly, just whatever the next step is, I'm ready to take it.
Nice. I love it. Sounds like networking has been a key factor for you as well.
For the most part, yeah. There's definitely, when I was younger, people were talking a lot about, not only in just driving and racing, but just life in general, like your net worth is your network and that whole saying. And I was always like, yeah, right. Like, I'm just going to put in the work. And then you kind of see over the years, like, wow, it really was just not even more so the network, but just like these crazy chance happenings and random people you end up running up with. And one thing leads to another. And you're like, wow, just like this conversation I had with this guy for 30 seconds is like, this is the reason why I live in like a completely different state, for example. And there's kind of something I'm sure we'll touch about a little bit more, and how I ended up living in Las Vegas was kind of one of those like weird little encounters with people that you don't really think much of at the moment. And before you know it, like your entire life has changed compared to like if you had never spoke to that person in the first place. So for the most part, again, just really blessed with like all the people who've kind of helped me get up through the ranks and just helped me with job opportunities and whatnot. So I'll kind of touch about that a little bit more later on in the show.
Definitely. It sounds like even these brief interactions, even if it's for 30 seconds, like you said, it's a pretty pivotal moment to really kind of set you up for on a totally different trajectory.
Yeah.
From what it sounds like. Speaking of pivotal moments, when did you realize, Nick, that you had a love for driving? And what did your journey look like in pursuit of it?
Well, that is definitely an answer we can dive deep into quite a bit. So I think that my initial path into being interested in driving, racing cars itself is, honestly, it starts off pretty similarly to how most people get about it. Just Mario Kart, just playing it as a kid. And, you just get interested in it. You're just messing around. But it was interesting because, well, there was no one in my personal life growing up who cared about cars. Like my parents have no interest in cars, driving, racing. I mean, sure, like they watched like Formula One like back in the 80s and 90s, but very, very casually. Like they're like, oh, they know Senna, they know Prost. Oh. That's about it. Like very like surface level knowledge on driving.
Right.
So I'm not really sure why these like initial driving games, even if it was something as simple as Mario Kart, was so interesting in the first place. Mm-hmm. And fortunately enough, as I started playing these games, for whatever reason, I was just like really good at it, like right out of the gate. Like eventually we got a Wii, we were playing Mario Kart on that system. And like my dad, he was like really trying at it. And he like, just for whatever reason, just could not beat me. And he had like the whole little 90s set up on his computer. So he kind of knew what he was doing, and it just like leaps and bounds better. And I don't know why I had like such a natural skill while I was picking up on it so much. And so that kind of progresses over the years, get a PlayStation, start playing Gran Turismo. I was doing really well at that. And then, of course, years go on, started getting into racing. After a couple of years, as I became a teenager, I was like watching Formula One, watching NASCAR, all that sort of stuff. And it reached a point, like as I was finishing high school, it was like pretty much the only thing I cared about. Everything in my life was surrounded about like consuming as much motorsports media and entertainment as I possibly could manage, to the point that I think it kind of irked my parents a little bit. I maybe could have focused a little bit more on homework, but hey, we got through it. So that's kind of the first part of the story. Of course, one more aspect of that was just sim racing after COVID hit and everything. And that's when I finally like invested in getting a whole wheel and pedals and everything. And it was doing really well at that. And of course, there are some connections that kind of led up just through people you meet online. But that was kind of the first aspect of it. I was really good at like memorizing all the facts and like playing the driving games, but I never thought that through all that, I'd actually become a driver myself. I thought by the time I started taking it seriously, well, I was just a little bit too old. And you read like all the professional drivers, they started when they were like 3 years old or whatnot. And I was just like, I don't know how to like actually get to become a driver in the first place.
Right.
And so leading on to the second part of this, COVID hits, everyone's home. I have online classes. I'm pretty much stuck on the street, not much is going on. And I'm talking to a neighbor of mine who actually, coincidentally enough, raced like SCCA in the 60s and 70s.
Nice.
And we're talking, and he mentions to me, he's like, oh, I have this like friend of mine, and she used to race in like IMSA in the 80s and 90s. And she runs a go-karting school up in Davis, California called Blue Max Kart Club. And he says like, oh, okay, like I know you're interested in driving and stuff, so I'll give her a call, and like maybe you can go out, just take the school for the fun of it. It's just like a one-day program, just have some fun and whatnot, nothing too serious. And I was like, okay. So I went up there and did the school, and I'm just like driving around on the go-karts like, oh, it's like K1 speed, but just a little bit faster. And it's like a little bit more serious, and it was nice. And but I didn't think there was anything that was going to come from it. Like literally was just like keep myself entertained for the day as things were starting to open back up after COVID. So anyways, the school finishes, and she comes up to me, and her name's Lisa Caceres, and she does like consulting for like Mazda Motorsports, and she does like private fitness and everything. So she's still really involved in the industry, I should say. But she comes up to me and she says, hey, you're pretty good. I'd like to mentor you. Like obviously not in those exact words, but like that's kind of, she like obviously saw something in me and tried to kind of help me out. And actually like she saw that I could do something with the talent I had. So she helped me get installed like actually having my own go-kart and like figuring out the different racing series out in Northern California. And then it kind of just took off from there. So I did karting for a year up in Sonoma and the Rock series. I had a 125cc tag kart, and there were some learning curves, you could say, and like not necessarily the driving. I think the driving always was very like able to pick up on it super fast no matter what I got in, but everything outside of it, like how to work on the go-kart, how to get ready for the race weekends, the registration, talking to people, like all the things that lead up to the driving event itself is kind of what I learned through karting itself and seeing how big the industry really was and how expensive it really was, of course.
Yes.
So I did really well in karting. She introduced me to a couple people she knew through her consulting gig with Mazda, with the whole Team Mazda challenge that they run. And with that, she was like, okay, well, you're doing relatively good in karts, but you're not like super invested in it. So let's maybe just try to get you into cars as soon as possible. And that's what kind of led into the whole Spec Miata deal and whatnot. So she, the former business development director of Mazda Motorsports' grassroots program, she connected me with him. And he then connected me with a team in Southern California because he knew that I was going back to school in UC Riverside to start my third year as COVID was kind of finishing up at that point. And yeah, just got into Spec Miata with a team called Hicks Motorsports. They're based out of Simi Valley, and they still do some stuff on the side. And there's a couple of other coaches at Porsche who have some involvement with them, but they're just like a little family team, runs a bunch of cars out of their garage and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we kind of just took off from there, did the track day, got basically the approval to fast track up to the licensing school, got the racing license, and that was it. Just getting into cars and racing Spec Miata and doing really well at that. Won the championship the first year in Spec Miata. Moved up to Spec MX-5. That was a little bit less successful of a program, only because I didn't really have the budget to like really like have practice time and whatnot. And of course, mechanical problems and whatnot. And basically a very good first year. But I think the second year in Spec MX-5 and having all the problems made me realize the other side of racing. It made me a bit more realistic of like, okay, I can't just keep spending this money that I'm making from working and whatnot on driving, because you get in one crash, that's $5,000 or whatever. And it's like, is this something I really want to invest in long term unless I have a backer?
Right.
So it reached a point where, luckily, the final race of the season, I managed to get a podium. And after that, I was like, I would think I was content with what I had achieved. That's awesome. And it was more so a fact of like, if an opportunity to race again comes in the future, of course I'll take it. But at the same time, I'm like, I could either spend $5,000 on a race weekend or save that $5,000 and go on a very nice vacation to Hawaii or something like that. And it was kind of like that. And then saving up for my master's degree and whatnot. You have to be a bit realistic about it.
I appreciate you sharing that. It sounds like, you had a natural talent for driving, right? But then all these other nuances like you discovered, that's the networking and then getting into these cars and then there's the price that goes with it. And I'm sure events cost money, the cars cost money. Then there's if things break, it's not a matter of if, it's when, right? And then all of these realities started to come together. And then you started to see, okay, well, like you mentioned, do you want to invest that time? But that was pretty wonderful that you saw that. But we'll pivot a little bit based on that. Now, obviously, your natural talent you discovered, right? Is there like a particular moment that you recognized that you had the talent? And was there a moment that you also realized that you could make money from it?
I'm not really sure if there's a pure defined moment when I realized I had talent, because I think it was always there from the very start. And I always knew that I was very good, to the point that I didn't understand why I was so good. And this is something I actually honestly kind of struggle with answering even now with all my experience. I don't understand why driving clicks so well for me. I understand the inputs that are necessary to make a car go fast.
Right.
I know what I'm doing is correct, but I'm not sure why my brain just seems to have that knowledge of just naturally doing it instinctively, when other people, like they're good drivers, but they have to put a lot of effort and a lot of practice, and they have to like rehearse like any other sport. And just for me, it feels like I can just jump into everything and for the most part be pretty successful. I'm not sure why I have that ability, especially because I'd never had a background of like family or whatnot.
Yeah.
I guess realizing like, okay, I could actually do something with driving was more so like sim racing. The whole iRacing boom after COVID was just, I got the wheel and the pedals and I just kind of saw my name climb up the ranking. I was just gaining more and more iRating. There reached a point when maybe like after a year and a half of consistent driving on iRacing on the roadside, I was like 7,600 iRating, which for those people listening who don't understand the reference, that would put me at like top 500 in the world out of like 150,000 people, top 25 in the United States, top 5 in California for road ranking.
Impressive.
But I was also doing like the oval stuff, the dirt oval, dirt road, anyways, all sorts of stuff on that. And I think through the sim racing and realizing like, okay, I can get into these top split races, and I didn't have the fanciest setup and I was still doing really, really well. I think it was from that time of being really dedicated to iRacing where I think I realized like, okay, like this isn't just being good at driving. This is like way above the average level that most people jump onto it. And I think it was from that, I was like, okay, let's start to take stuff a little bit more seriously. And I think that kind of lent itself into the perfect time of then having the actual driving opportunities show up through karting and whatnot at the same time.
Nice. That's awesome. I mean, it's definitely a combination of raw talent and then being in the right place at the right time. That's what it seems like. Now, with that said, now before Porsche, you coached Corvettes at their facility in Nevada. What were your experiences there like? And what are some pros and cons that you've encountered?
Yeah. So the way that I got connected with Spring Mountain Motorsports Ranch, which is in Pahrump, Nevada, it's about 45 minutes west of Las Vegas, so just across the next county. And the reason why they put the whole facility there in the 90s was specifically because of like taxes and just it being cheaper compared to Clark County and for Las Vegas itself. But that was actually through sim racing, the way I got connected with that opportunity itself, where basically some guy reached out to me who I knew through like some random team I was a part of. And he's like, hey, me and a couple of friends, we're doing this like sim racing event and it's like cash prizes and whatnot. And he's like, we need one more driver. You want to do it with us? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And they all lived in Las Vegas actually. So through that, we actually won that event for our class, and that kind of bonded us all together. And he like invited me to their team that they have. And it was a bunch of people who were living in Vegas. And so once university classes started again and I was back in Riverside, there were a couple of times and I was like, hey, I'm bored. And he's like, oh, come up to Vegas, come see us and whatnot. And so I was kind of hanging out with that whole group. And it was just before I was about to graduate and I didn't have everything lined up because I was going to finish actually 2 quarters early. And I'm at my friend's place in Vegas and he's like, hey, like, I know you're like driving. And I was in the middle of my Spec Miata season. And he's like, well, I know this old guy that I used to spot for, and he works as a coach at this place out in Pahrump, and maybe you'd be interested in whatnot. Like, I think you'd really have the ability to coach people and whatnot from the way I've heard you talk and whatnot. So yeah, I just went out there, I interviewed, and I ended up getting the job. And I was like, okay, like, wow, like never in a million years would I think I'd actually get paid to drive now. And I think that was, if the whole sim racing thing was me realizing I had the talent, getting the coaching job at Spring Mountain was me realizing that I felt like I had achieved that goal of turning driving into something once I actually got that job. And I was like, now I feel like, of course, with racing, I was like still trying to pay like to race Spec Miata, but like with the coaching, that was the first time where I felt like I was on the other side of this like big wall between people who work and people who pay to do it. And that was a very fulfilling experience.
Nice.
So with Spring Mountain, how it works is that when you purchase a new Corvette, at least with the C8s when I started, you get a discount to take the 2-day owner's school there. And it's a bunch of laps on the track, lead follows, you look at videos, it's like driving theory on a whiteboard. It's a very stereotypical driving school, but because it's over 2 days and you get to spend the night at the facility if you're a customer, it's a bit more in depth in what they're able to cover rather than just trying to push you through as fast as possible because they know like, okay, you just spent like almost $100,000 on your fully loaded Corvette 3LT, whatever, with that your New Balance shoes are going to look perfect inside and whatnot. But yeah, with the Corvettes and whatnot, very, very fun platform. I love the way that the vehicle with the C8 Stingray, at least, it's a very playful car. And of course, now that I work at Porsche and having those rear engine variants to compare it to, I think I realized that the Corvette feels like a lot more of a lighter, smaller car than it actually is. And like you can get up onto the curbs, you can slide it through the corners, and it's a very like controlled platform if you know what you're doing with it. The pendulum effect that I like to describe a lot of cars is very, very predictable in that vehicle. And so like I feel like it was actually a really good platform to learn how to slide a car, get car control and whatnot. It was more in the moment, like feedback that felt a bit more predictable in what you're trying to adjust in that car. And then just driving on the track, I think the pure lap time, the pure speed, acceleration, braking and everything for the price point.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can see why the Corvette is so popular now. When before I was like, oh, everybody has Corvettes and whatnot. And I mean, I saw the appeal, but like once I actually started coaching in that car, I was like, wow, like this is a lot of fun. And that probably touches for the most part with the Corvettes and whatnot, just kind of how they handle. I still kind of miss them for the most part. But at the same point, they kind of reached a time when I felt like I had kind of plateaued in terms of what I was learning. And as Corvettes got even more and more popular, there's some parts of the facility and whatnot where I just felt like there's a little bit more to offer than what we were providing. And I still kind of knew that I wanted to go back to graduate school. So I wasn't like totally invested in the job and staying in Nevada. So they reached a point when I was like, you know, I had my fun. Like, I feel like I achieved what I wanted to achieve in this job. And I just ended up going back to California because I knew I was going to probably stay in California for grad school just with in-state tuition and whatnot. So that was kind of the end of that, but very, very fortunate to have that opportunity in my life to like basically learn what it took to be a coach and kind of practice this people skills and the driving skills, understand all the behind the scenes stuff about the industry, but I was definitely a little bit wide eyed and didn't realize like, okay, you can't actually do this and that and whatnot. And I think that really helped prepare me for like now working at Porsche, where it feels like I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. I did all that proving at the previous coaching gig and whatnot. And now with Porsche, it's like, okay, well, I already did this other cool stuff. So I'm not like pressured to try to achieve anything else here because I'm already like personally content with everything. And now it's more so just a bonus what I get to do now.
Oh, that's awesome. Now with the, because you mentioned C8s, right? Were you driving any older models, Corvettes?
No, it was just the brand new Corvettes, the C8 Stingrays. We did have the Z06 delivery as well. And that was definitely a little bit of a heavier car for the most part, even though it's just like 150 pounds more than the Stingray. Definitely felt a bit more like a supercar, at least. But there wasn't really anything like old school. I mean, I did some private coaching, and that was like 2018 Camaro ZL1 1LE, like just what people are bringing in, but it was still like relatively newer stuff, especially considering the income of a lot of the resort members there. There was also with Radical Race Cars, they had like a SCCA like licensing like school prerequisite where like if you passed our course, we'd like sign you off to be like fast tracked for an SCCA license or whatnot. But it was all like the newest of new stuff.
Okay.
Definitely more so reflective of like, okay, we're just trying to like sell cars here. So obviously it's just gonna be the newest equipment. But I'd say in general, I haven't really had the chance to drive like super old stuff. And I think that's something that would be nice to try out in the future if there was the opportunity, where it feels like I'm always like coaching and working with people, but just like to sell product. It'd be nice to like coach simply for the sake of coaching itself, no matter what platform that might be.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating just because the C8's obviously mid-engine, right? Compared to everything else they had, front engine, rear wheel drive. So it's a little different. Now, would they allow previous, like if you're, obviously I'm sure the Corvette owners have been like lifers, right? Could they allow them to bring their older Corvette to that facility, or were they strict on that?
Well, it's a bit of a unique setup because the whole owner school with the Corvettes and whatnot is very separated from the resort itself. So like a golf resort, you pay your dues, you pay your initial initiation to become a member, and then you have all the track days. And basically, as the car's road legal, has the airbags and whatnot, you can just drive around the tracks on the designated days. And it's almost like the owner school of the Corvettes and the Radicals is like contracted out. They just come in, they use the facility, but we're like very separate from all the rest of the happenings of the resort and everything itself. So that's probably more of a question that'd be related to like, oh, like if you're a member itself at the place, but that's probably the best way I can put that into words.
Okay, fair enough. I like that. Now, what are some distinct differences between coaching at Porsche and then coaching at Spring Mountain that you've noticed?
You know, you would be surprised because of the stereotype that Corvette owners have. You'd think, man, those guys, they're going to suck. They're going to be like moseying around the facility and whatnot. But, you know, I definitely had that thought too by the time I finished working there. But now working at Porsche and realizing like people come in, they're just trying to do it for the fun of it. And they like don't really come with driving experience versus people like they bought the car and now they're going to do it at the Corvette school. So there's a bit more investment.
Right.
It's just such different clientele, I think, throughout the two facilities with different customers who are showing up. But I think like a lot of Southern California culture kind of comes into the whole coaching at Porsche, where just the people you work with and whatnot, it's like there's so many other things going on in their life. And this is just one add-on to it.
Yeah.
But with the Corvette owners, it felt like this was the priority to an extent. And I think because of that, it was a little bit more rewarding because you know they're going to take the knowledge back home to their own car. While with Porsche, sure, they're going to have some knowledge. And I always tell people like, hey, you're raising your ceiling of what you can do now so that when you go back home and drive just on the street, everything feels a lot less daunting.
Yeah.
But the knowledge of the car itself is not inherently as relevant because they usually don't own the car themselves, or it's like a gift or an anniversary or whatnot. And so the Porsche coaching and whatnot, there's still a bunch of great drivers who show up by chance, but it's more so an addition to everything else they're doing. While the coaching with the Corvettes in that school was like the principal aspect.
Right. It's like their intention.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, would you say I'm sure you've you've come across some Porsche owners, I'm sure. Now, if you were to compare the Porsche owners you've coached versus the Corvette owners you've coached, how would you, in a simple way, distinct the two differences? Like, is there a difference as far as personality, as far as drive, or are they pretty much a similar type of driver?
It feels like with Corvette owners, their car that they have purchased is the primary car in their life. But with a Porsche owner, while it is their primary car, I feel like a Porsche owner is a lot more likely to have multiple Porsches at the same time. And it feels like most likely just with the cost of buying a Porsche now, that if you can afford a Porsche, you can probably afford a lot of them.
Right.
But a Corvette is just close enough to being economically viable for a lot larger swath of people that it's more so of an investment. It's like, okay, like I've been waiting all this time and now I can finally buy my Corvette and I'm going to make this my baby and whatnot. And I think that's why you see a lot more of like closer to like retirement age people buying Corvettes, because it's like, okay, now they finally have the free time. They finally have the money to spend and they've been waiting forever to finally buy a Corvette. And now they finally get to do it. And I think there's maybe a bit more surface level passion that comes out because of that. And I think that's why you see a lot more generic stereotypes about Corvette owners, because it's just more like the joy that's coming out of their ownership and just, of course, the general age bracket. But with Porsche owners, probably a bit of a larger swath of people. But at the same time, I would argue maybe that's just a fact that we're in Southern California and that there's so many different groups of people here in the first place.
Right.
Like, I'm curious if you went to the Porsche Experience Center in Atlanta or Toronto, or even the one that they're going to open in Singapore, would the kind of people that you see at that facility be a lot more of a narrow subset of people just because of the region that that facility is placed in? And I think that's where you see the most differences itself. Of course, there are other things I can touch upon, just generic stereotypes of crazy rich people who are showing up for their 20th Experience Center delivery and they're just going crazy on the options and whatnot. But I think that's most likely the best way to frame it is the Corvette. Both the owners are fantastic, of course, but the Corvette is like more like a singular priority versus the Porsche. It's an add-on to everything else in their life.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm sure location has a lot to do with it, right? Demographic influences quite a bit how we make decisions and how we purchase as well. Now, you personally, Nick, if you had to choose between the brands, which do you prefer coaching in and which do you prefer driving in and why?
I have to find a way to answer this in a way that still allows me to retain my job. So I would say that when I was working at Spring Mountain, there was a lot more personal driving time. At Spring Mountain, there was a freedom to where you could go in a car on the circuit, and as long as you're being respectful, not trying to scream the tires and bang off the rev limiter and everything and all the other generic stuff, you could get out, just drive on the circuit and practice. And look at your own videos and whatnot. And the Corvette has this fantastic performance data recorder built in the cars now that is really nice. Like, look at your traces and everything.
Nice.
And there was a lot of opportunity at Spring Mountain for self-improvement on your own accord. While working at Porsche, it's a lot more expected that you have that already. Yeah. And so they're a lot stricter on things you can do outside of the pure coaching that will allow you to work on things for your own. And they actually make it very clear that this is not a facility where you're trying to prove something or trying to be noticed.
Right.
And I think that's what kind of leads into just a very, not restrictive environment, but just very controlled in terms of what you can and can't do. Versus at Spring Mountain, there's a lot more flexibility and interpretation of what you would be allowed to do and more freedom and kind of going about things and how you see fit as long as you meet that end goal. And I still think that with the center in Los Angeles for Porsche, I think they've started to make some inroads and trying to replicate that a little bit more. But sometimes I also kind of wonder, like, oh, is it because you're out in Prump and it's like a much quieter area? And obviously GM, as much as you can argue it, it's probably not seen as prestigious as Porsche. So maybe they're trying to control that image.
Yeah.
But personally, I'd say that at the end of the day, they're both fantastic platforms. And I think the only way you can determine which one is better for you is the price.
Mm.
I think that the Corvette is great for the price. The Porsche is great for the price as well, although there can be some more arguments just because it's probably double.
Mm.
And a lot of people make arguments as well where they say, well, the Porsche has less horsepower than a Corvette and it's twice as expensive. But I think you lose out on a lot of nuances on the engineering and the way the cars handle and whatnot. And so it really just comes down to the person itself. Like, if you ignore the pure numbers aspect of it, the things that a Porsche does differently to a Corvette or what a Corvette does differently to a Porsche, how much do you value that in terms of price? And then that's what you're going to have to use to make the determination of which one is best for you. But one final thing to touch upon that, I'm kind of beating around the bush. I'm sure a lot of viewers can tell on that, but probably to purely compare the two cars themselves, I describe a C8 Corvette, the base Stingray, as a Cayman that has 100 more horsepower and is stiffer. And of course, both mid-engine and whatnot, both a bit of a lighter variant. But the 911, even though one would argue is a pretty direct competitor to Corvette, actually drives a lot, not a lot, but there are substantial differences in how the cars handle. To a point that I feel like if you're trying to replace one with another, it's not actually the correct competitor for that car itself.
Fair enough. Now, if you were to spec one of each, which would you choose?
Well, I drive a bright yellow Subaru BRZ at the moment, so I love my fancy colors. The way I describe it to everybody is that if I'm driving on 405 southbound after work, I do not want to look like everyone else. I need some non-NPC energy in my life. So if I could spec any Porsche, I would buy a base 911 GT3 with no options except for ventilated seats. I would have an acid green exterior with black rims, black mirror caps, black leather, black trim everywhere except for the exterior color, acid green. In your face, but still classy.
Nice.
It would look fantastic driving around Buttonwillow. That's what I always imagine. Now, for Corvette, I would be a little bit more tame. I still like all my black trims and whatnot, but probably just a white exterior or charcoal. Charcoal, I think, has been becoming a lot more popular recently on vehicles, like charcoal, chalk, bit of a darker matte gray, or just bright blue. I think you can never go wrong with one of the more generic colors on the whole color wheel. Bright blue, bright red, bright green. Just something that's out there, but not like totally unique. And then still stick with black rims. Like, I love my black rims. People think I'm crazy. It's like, oh, it blends in with the tire and it blends in with the body and it needs to be its own thing. But I look at cars with like white rims or silver rims, and I'm sorry to anyone listening, but just the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I just look at it and I go back to like the Cars movie with the white wall tires and whatnot, and just kind of does the same thing. It just
too classic looking.
I like the black rims allow it to blend nicely with any body shape.
Okay.
But a lot of people say like, oh no, I want the wheels to be separate from the car itself. And I guess I just see it differently from that. So Porsche, base GT3, acid green, Corvette, base C51 Stingray. Give me like porcelain or chalk color, and everything else pretty normal.
Beautiful. I love it. What would you say is your experiences with dating? Like, when people find out that you're a driver and you've raced, does that add any influence of them to want to date you even more?
It's funny you say that, because I think I found over the years that the less I mentioned about driving, the more successful I was to a certain extent. And I think, like, especially when I was right in the midst of racing and whatnot, I was definitely like trying to like prop it up as like, oh, look at me, I'm so unique and everything. And like, this is what makes me stand out from everyone else. And it's not just that I'm just putting around doing track days. Like, I'm actually racing, I was actually winning. And I was like trying to like use that as like, not as like, oh, this is why you should date me, but it's like, hey, like, you're with someone, you want them to be unique, you want them to stand out. It's like, hey, I'm still doing stuff in my own personal life that makes me a more complete person. So I think it was very confusing when I started to understand, like, it doesn't really make a difference. And it wasn't even with driving itself. It was like any hobbies or interests or anything I have, I don't really feel like made much of an influence with that. And so over the years, I think I was very much more so focused on just me as an individual person and how I was in the moment rather than constantly trying to tie everything back into what I was doing outside of that moment when I'm with the person itself. And I think living more so in the moment and being a bit more spontaneous rather than treating those interactions as like, this is everything I do, check, 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 and trying to go back to more so in the moment interactions, I think helped me quite a bit. Of course, there's some other aspects I'm sure could have improved as well, but I think I was more so just a very late bloomer maturity wise. And I think sometimes a lot of people who have like drivers themselves, they're very unique in terms of personality quirks and whatnot. And I'm sure for a lot of people that can sometimes be off-putting.
Yeah.
But I think kind of working around that to my benefit, I think that's what helped out at the end of the day.
That's fair. I think all of us as drivers are a little bit unique. I would say special. You know, maybe some have a little more than others of autism, but hey, that's what makes us unique, I'd say.
I think that we're the more socially acceptable version of people when the other side of those people are the ones who like watching the Amtrak trains go along.
Yeah.
It's kind of like opposite side of that. But
interesting comparison. Yeah.
I think there's so many other things I could go into, but I'm not sure if whatever platform would let us to publish that. But
that's fair. That was pretty spot on. Now, Nick, considering everything that you've driven, what would you recommend a newcomer, like a complete noob, never had a sports car before? They're just entering this world for the first time. What would you recommend them to choose and why?
Throughout my years of driving, I have realized that you don't need a sports car or any performance car to have fun driving around on the road. And no matter what you have, even if it's a Prius, even if it's a Volvo station wagon, even if it's your mom SUV that has only seen the gas station at Costco when it's racing, any platform will allow you to have fun driving anywhere. And there have been times when I've done track days and I've literally seen people in minivans going around the circuit.
That's awesome.
And so with that, the second part of that answer is that there's a lot of stuff you have to do to a car to prepare it for more high performance driving. When you're driving on the street, any car is going to hold up fine to where like even a car that's not meant for performance driving, if you know what you're doing, you're still going to have a lot of fun with it. Like with us down here in Southern California, you could be driving a base model Honda Fit. You take it up to Angeles Crest, you know what you're doing. You're still going to have a ton of fun out there. Mm-hmm. But preparing that same car for the track, you're going to need to change out the tires, the brakes, maybe the rotors and whatnot. Maybe you need to get some high temperature fluids and whatnot. And even very performance-oriented cars are going to need all that work done. Mm-hmm. And so if you're maybe a little bit tight on the budget and whatnot, focus less so on spending the most amount of money to buy the most performance-capable car right out of the box, and instead get something a little bit more normal. And instead invest that money in actually prepping it so that it'll last a lot longer. I think that's one thing I do regret. Well, not necessarily regret, but I wish I would have known earlier with my BRZ, is that I bought it and I was like, oh, well, it's a performance package. It has the Sachs dampers and it has the Brembo brakes. But then I wish I would have realized like, okay, this is how much money I'm going to have to spend on maybe getting an oil cooler and doing a track alignment and doing the fluids. And I'm going to have to change the fluids, and it doesn't really make the car that effective on the street unless I'm constantly spending the money changing everything every 1,000 miles. And so I think knowing that knowledge, I haven't, as a result, utilized my car maybe as effectively as I'd like to, compared to maybe if I bought something that wasn't like maybe intended to be a performance car, but was like $15,000 instead of 21, whatever that I paid for mine. And instead spent that extra budget on prepping it, would have been a lot more peace of mind. So I'd say for people who are considering getting a car and whatnot, just make sure you have the money to invest in everything that comes after the initial purchase price, and don't count on the manufacturer itself building the car to where it's ready to go on the track right away.
Fair enough. Now, just lastly to touch on, because our Porsche Experience Center in LA versus, the Corvette's driving school in Spring Mountain, there's a cost difference, right? What would you say for the average Corvette owner and the average Porsche owner? What would the difference between going here in LA? Obviously, it's the location, the region's different, but what are the school price differences?
Yeah, so Of course, I'm not sure if anything's changed at Spring Mountain in the year and a half since I've left, but actually, if the Corvette owner school, it's only eligible if you purchase a Corvette itself. You can't just sign up unless like you're a guest of someone.
Like brand new?
Yeah.
Okay.
You must be a brand new purchaser of the car, and they basically give you a certificate or whatnot at the dealer when you go purchase the vehicle. And that's for, you only end up paying like $1,000 rather than if it expires, you don't go within the year, it's like $4,000 at 2 days. So you have to use it within 12 months of purchasing the car. And I think that's just how they cycle through everybody, because there's a huge wait list for that. Like when I left, it was over a year wait list just to go out and take the school.
Wow.
And with Porsche, I think the experiences start around $650 for 90 minutes. It kind of goes up to about $1,500 for the highest model stuff, like the GT3, Turbo S, and everything. I wouldn't say that the differences in price are comparable, just because there's so many different things that are being taught between the two versus experience versus actual driving school.
Right.
But really, I think the fact that you have to own a Corvette in order to take the school out there, even if it is cheaper, well, you know, most people aren't going to have access to that versus the Porsche thing. Like anyone can show up, anyone can sign up.
Right.
There's just so many different pricing points that it'd be hard to touch upon on just this episode. But a lot of people do ask me like, oh, like, do you think it's worth it just paying like $750 or even more just for like a 90-minute session? I think it's so nuanced. Like there's so many things that people want from one person to another that like I can't answer that question fairly. Like what you are going to be satisfied with is going to be totally different versus the next person that I end up working with.
Right.
I would say though that if you are considering purchasing a Porsche, no matter how much it costs, go and do it. The peace of mind you're going to have in your own driving abilities and just learning things about the car are going to help you out so much in the long term. And the cost of the experience is so little in comparison to how much you're paying for the price itself that without a doubt, don't even hesitate. Go take the experience, even if you're just considering purchasing the car. I had a gentleman show up. He just wanted to buy a base model Taycan. Still showed up to the Experience Center, still did the experience in that car, learned so many things that in comparison to how much he was going to end up paying to buy that car at the dealer, the amount of personal knowledge that he's getting from that 90 minutes is so valuable. Mm-hmm. And I think you need to put a price value onto that knowledge as something lucrative to achieve for.
Definitely. I agree. Now, Nick, I know you've kind of touched on many things in the spectrum of, quality of life and experiences of just different types of driving and racing you've experienced. What would you say is next for you?
Well, it really depends on what happens after I finish my master's degree at UCI. And I tell a lot of people when they're like, man, you got the best job in the world. And I'm explaining like, yeah, this is just kind of trying to pay the bills and whatnot. But it would be nice to turn driving into something I do just for the fun of it again. And sure, there's so many benefits of coaching and whatnot, but there's still the education that I'm pursuing. There's still something maybe a little bit more stable long-term that I can end up achieving. And while, yes, I would like to do the coaching, maybe even more sporadically part-time in the future, I think that eventually it'll just go back to the purest form of it all, just doing simple track days, just driving up, setting up for the day, for the weekend, just driving around, doing the laps. Honestly, sometimes I think I'm not even going to bother with a lap time. I'm just going to do it for the pure joy of driving itself. And I think just positioning myself in a way in the future to where I can afford to do as many track days I want is all that I'm hoping for. Like if I have the freedom to drive no matter what it is in, but just the freedom to drive on my terms, I think that's the best I can hope for in the future. Of course, earlier on, I touched upon like, yeah, if there's an opportunity to race in the future, I'd like to, but these days I'm a lot more financially considerate of what it takes to continue that. And there's so many other things that I have now that I've discovered in the past few years that I like to keep myself entertained with. That driving in comparison to like when I was a kid and like it was the only thing I consumed, I think there's a lot more things now that I can keep myself enjoyed with and enthusiastic with to where now, well, a bit of a tie back. Now driving is a benefit to my life rather than the sole focus. And how can I make that benefit the greatest benefit possible? Best way to put that.
Right. Well, Nick, that was amazing. There's so much insight you've shared, a lot of knowledge, a lot of intellect you've discovered. And I learned something new about you every time I hang out with you. But just diving deep into your past is amazing. So thank you for sharing so much of that. And let's just say if the audience wanted to reach out to you, they had any comments or questions, where can they find you?
Yeah. Well, I'm not too much of a social media user, but sporadically I check Instagram and whatnot. So just Nick Alaoui, Nickalaoui. Send me a DM on there. I feel like I'm very much understanding the plight of people asking, how do I break into this industry? Because I was on that side as well. And now that I'm on the other end of the wall, I want to help as many other people climb that as well. So whoever's interested, let me know. And to the best of my abilities, I'll try to guide you on the right path as effectively as I can.
Thank you so much, Nick. And I appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Wonderful setup we have here. And I think that we were able to touch on a lot of things that I'm sure will be helpful to people no matter what their background is in the audience. So thank you once more, and it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. And just want to touch on, from your experiences. I remember my very first game I played was called Vet, and very old school. It was on a Mac, but leading up to more racing games like Need for Speed had one just dedicated to Porsche. All of that, just kind of inspires you to want to do more. And it was really fascinating to hear that, we had some similarities, but also came across it very differently. So thank you so much for that. And it just, we all do it for the joy, right? Whatever makes us feel like that inner kid, that inner child's coming out to play. So thank you so much, Nick. Appreciate it.
I try my best.
Shifted Perspective is produced by Sociology of Everything, supported by Havana Cigar Lounge in Hesperia, California. I'm your host, Shift. Please feel free to reach out to me on social media, found in the description, or email me at shift@sociologyofeverything. Together, we shift the perspective, expand possibilities, and become insiders. Thank you so much for listening, and see you guys next week.